Hello and welcome to the Moonshots Podcast. It's episode 273. I'm your co-host, Mike Parsons, and as always, I'm joined by the man himself, Mr. Mark Pearson-Freeland. Good morning, Mark.
Hey, good morning, Mike. Good morning, listeners. Good morning, Moonshots family. Good morning, subscribers. Good morning, world. Because, Mike, we've got a episode ahead of us today. A beautiful episode with, I think, a lot of inspiration, a little bit of guidance, and something that's going to scratch an itch for some of us who are thinking maybe there's something else out there with regards to my job, salary, as well as curiosity.
I think you're right. It is the perfect companion, Mark, to the art of nonconformity, which we did in the last episode. We're actually staying with the same author, but now moving into the world of side hustle. But it's not the drop shipping mania you might think, is it, Mark?
No, that's not the case at all, Mike. We are going back into, as you say, Chris Guillebeau's work. Last time we got into the art of nonconformity, keeping us motivated and striving towards maybe a little bit of discomfort, and how fear is a guide for knowing where to go. This time we're getting into one of Chris's other very, very popular books, the second in our trilogy on the Moonshot Show of Chris Guillebeau, this time with Side Hustle. And Mike, this one, I suppose similar to the art of nonconformity to a certain extent, maybe a little bit of a nice side plate to the first course that we had last time. This is another practical sort of step-by-step guide to help those who are thinking about either launching a new business, maybe launching a new way of working with others, or perhaps just scratching a little bit of an itch. Maybe there's a curiosity that they have in regards to a creative idea or a new concept of something, maybe a service that they want to put out into the world. This book is really guidance, I suppose, for helping people with knowing what to do, perhaps without quitting their day job. So maintaining that security. And I think that is quite a point of difference, really, from Chris's book, because it's not just quit your job and go out and start something new, is it?
Yeah. And I mean, he's certainly not encouraging us just to do a drop shipping SaaS AI company. Imagine that as a combination.
Wow.
I think what he's doing is it's really following up on the first book that we covered. He's challenging us to pursue things that bring us joy, interest, curiosity, fulfillment, satisfaction. And he's kind of giving us a bit of a nudge saying, hey, well, maybe this could be some sort of side hustle. So if you are feeling a little bit frustrated, or you're looking for a little bit more, if you have a job at the moment or you're a student, this book is for you. This show is really going to give you some great tips, because really this is the most healthiest way I think I could recommend to anybody to get into the idea of a side hustle, because Chris in his book is so down to earth, as you'll see by these hilarious stories about people who built side hustles. So we've got so much to discover beyond the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. So as we start this journey, Mark, where do you want to begin?
Well, I think it's funny, Mike. Recently, I've spoken to so many people about side hustles. I think it really is a topic that is in the front of people's minds, not only in a time when, things are expensive, but also it's kind of still the new year. I know it's February, but people are looking to maybe go out and do something new. But there's a lot of caveats with this word of side hustle, isn't there? So let's actually hear from Chris, author of today's topic, side hustle, explain to us not only how it's great to have more than one source of income, but also what is his book all about.
And so the premise behind side hustle is you don't need to quit your job to start your own thing on the side.
Yes.
And I think I've heard you say everybody should have their own side hustle.
I think everybody should have a side hustle, even if you're an entrepreneur. I think everyone should have more than one source of income. And I wrote this book because I kept hearing from people who maybe weren't ready to be entrepreneurs right away, or they actually liked their job. They were happy working for the right company or organization or working for an entrepreneur. But they wanted to have more than one source of income because that's good for all sorts of reasons. So wanted to just basically create a process that people could follow, like a 27-day process that just shows the essentials, like not a bunch of stuff that you don't need, but here's what you just need to do to create an asset for yourself. Not a part-time job, not driving for Uber, but something that actually pays you real money. Well, I've got it broken down into like a 5-week process, basically. So the first week is all about ideas, about how to generate ideas. Now, a lot of your folks who are watching, maybe they're like really good at that already. They have plenty of ideas. But I've noticed that when people are getting started, sometimes they're like, well, I hear this idea for somebody else, but I don't know like what I'm good at. I don't know what skill I have that I could apply in this, entrepreneurial world. So I'm trying to help people like learn the power of observation. And then in the second week, it's all about selecting the best idea. Okay, you got like 5 ideas. How do you know which one is best for you right now? So there's an intuitive process called the Side Hustle Selector. It takes about 10 minutes, really quick and easy to go through. Week 3 is all about logistics and preparing to launch and like, what do you need? What are the deliverables? How do you make the website you need? All that kind of stuff. Week 4 is about launch and debut, like probably before you feel ready. Like your validation comes through experimentation with the marketplace, not through some advanced kind of thing you do, far in advance. And then week 5 is all about regroup and refine. Like once it's out there, what happens next? Like, is it a big success? Is it a big failure? Most likely, and this has been my experience, I'd be curious about yours. Most likely there's like a third option where you put something out and it's not a huge success, but it's also not a huge failure. It kind of works sort of. And so then how do you know what to do next? Like, how do you tweak it? How do you change something about it so that it can become more successful?
Yeah, side hustles, second form of income. I really like what Chris is saying there, because he's like, maybe you actually really like your job. And I think this is why I consider this to be the healthiest way to get into side hustles and avoid the drop shipping hype. What he's really doing is presenting, I think it's a new thought for the show that we haven't heard before, which is in 2025, we all need to have something that is in addition to our main source of income. I like this thought because, of course, I think workplace longevity is far more vulnerable, volatile, and changing. So I like that. And I think that the interesting thing here is, if you've read his the book we did in his in the first show, which is The Art of Nonconformity, this is the perfect next step. Because he also alluded to something, Mark, in that clip, which is maybe you're not ready to do your own startup. And the good news is, if you are ready, our next show will be on his book about doing your own startup. So don't worry about that. But I think what we're seeing here is a new thought. And if you think about all of the change that we've had in the last 5 years, I think it makes great sense to go out there and be curious and ask yourself, if you're inclined, what can I do for a second source of income, a little bit of extra cash, a side hustle? What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think it's an intimidating concept, including myself. I've thought about this before, and I've thought, how can I complement what I'm earning with an additional source of income? But it is tricky. Sometimes you think, oh, I've got so much freedom, but actually I feel squashed by the freedom because I could do anything. I could sell whatever I want. I could go out and create a new service. I wonder where to start. And you're right. I think there is a new idea within Chris's book here, which is telling us it's okay to feel a little bit lost in the ether with regard to what you can do with a side hustle. But what I particularly like is the fact that he's calling out the fact that the side hustle doesn't need to be a replacement of what you already do. No. I think that is a relief. And I think that's a relief for myself, but also probably a lot of our listeners and maybe even the readers of Chris's book. Maybe that was his intention. Yeah. Because by creating a more approachable way to enter into the business, so to speak, of side hustles, you then learn those essential tips. Maybe it's just the simple tips of researching, validating an idea, putting it out there, going to test it, and getting some feedback from potential customers. You might realize along the way, actually, this isn't the one for me. Maybe there's something else. Yeah. So what Chris is inviting us to do, I think, is just to go and give something a go. Go out and live your life as you probably want to go out and live it. Yes. And try something new and get a little bit uncomfortable.
It's so interesting that even though this is a very new idea, the second income idea we've just been discussing, what is very, very much a Moonshots idea is just do it.
Yeah.
So speaking to those of our listeners, viewers, and members who are maybe guilty, as we have all been, of flirting with an idea for way too long and not actually doing it, you'll notice that what he's saying is just do it, get yourself out there, and it's great side hustle and startup advice, which is you're probably going to be a little bit embarrassed about your first product or service. And that's okay, because if you're sitting there trying to polish everything to perfection prior to launch, the truth really is you'll never launch. So get yourself out there. It's like content creators like ourselves, just create and get yourself out there. And I think about how much we've improved our process and our shows over the last years together. But we could have been paralyzed at the beginning and we're like, oh, let's practice again. Let's not publish this one. No, just get it out there. It's great Moonshots thinking combined with a brand new thought that we have to consider the role of a bit of extra cash, a second income. And talking about income, we have some amazing members that actually contribute to our show every single month. And it's not cheap putting together a show that has so many listeners and viewers. Hosting and licensing and all of those things, they really do add up. And we are so grateful, Mark. And I think our members, the only thing they're waiting for is the official Mark Pearson-Freeland trumpets. So I better hand it over to you.
You're right. I was going to say dust it off, but actually this trumpet gets quite a lot of action at the end of the day, doesn't it? Let's welcome in, as usual, the people that make our show extra special. Those are our Moonshots members. Please welcome in our lineup. Bob, Dietmar, Marjan, Connor, Lisa, Sid, Mr. Bonjour, and Paul, Berg, Kalman, Joe, Christian, Samuela, Barbara, I've lost count. Deborah, Lasse, Stephen, Craig, Ravi, Yvette, Raul and Nicoara, Ingram, Dirk, Venkata and Jet, Roger, Steph, Roar and Diana, Christoph, Denise, Laura, Mike, Antonio, Zachary, Austin and Ola, Andy, Diana, Margie and Jasper, Fabian, Guhong, Eddie, Lars, Sabiha and Samyak. Guys, thank you so much for keeping the good Moonshot spaceship full of fuel, full of enthusiasm and full of a desire to go out and make these shows for you guys.
Yeah, very grateful. Thank you ever so much. And if you would like to be a member and supporter of the Moonshots podcast, head over to moonshots.io, click on the big members button, and you can become our Patreon and give us a little bit of support, which is less than a cup of coffee every month. So get caffeinated on the good thinking of Moonshots, be part of the family, and you'll be on the way to creating your side hustle. Which brings us, Mark, to this very important question. What on earth are we talking about? Like, what does this look like?
Yeah, you're quite right, Mike. Obviously, we heard a little bit from Chris in that opening clip. He's breaking down a few of the weeks with regards to his program. So identification, the selecting, the logistics, and so on. Let's take it another step further. Let's really put some meat on the bones and understand from Chris how we can identify the opportunities as well as understand what exactly is a side hustle.
So the book actually begins with the story of this British guy, and he's really into fish, like fish and fish tanks. That's his thing. So 3 years ago, he creates a little blog, like super simple WordPress blog with reviews of fish tanks, which kind of makes sense because if you're going to buy a fish tank, like you're going to type, fish tank reviews, you're going to figure out which one's the best one. So he makes this site in a weekend, and he actually does connect this to Amazon's affiliate program. If people click through, he gets a commission. So there's a whole story, but the short version or the end of that story is, 3 years have gone by. He hasn't done anything else for that website, but every month he's getting a check for about $700. So $700, you can't live off of that. But if it's $700 a month that you're not doing anything for, that's pretty amazing, right? You can pay a lot of bills with that. So that is a side hustle, in my opinion, because he's built an asset. Second story there's a woman who's a marketing director for a company in Florida, and she wanted to give her clients personalized candy hearts one year, like these candy hearts that say like "Be Mine" or "I Love You" or whatever. She wanted to personalize them with her clients' names. So she went searching and didn't find a lot of great options. There was like one company on page 6 of Google or something. So the long story short for her is she decided, I'm going to figure out how to do this myself. So over the course of the next year and a half, she starts this side hustle. She's a marketing director, so she figures out how to actually present her offer and get listed on the first page of Google and all that stuff. And now 2 years in, this side hustle is actually making 6 figures. So it's making $100,000 a year or more. And it's a seasonal side hustle because all the orders come in like between January and mid-February, basically. And in her case, she's actually decided to keep her job, because she's like, I like my job, I like the people I work with, but I also have this incredible security plan. So if something ever changed in my job, well, now I've got something else that I can do. So I think people do this for all kinds of different reasons, but those examples and the Amazon example, it's about creating an asset for yourself.
Got it. And so if you then decide that this side hustle is a thing you want to, quit your job and go all in on, do you then start another side hustle afterwards?
I tend to think everybody needs a side hustle, man, because it's not just about the money. Like I hear over and over just how empowering it is for people. It's like, it's empowering to just start a project and to get paid for it. It's like if anybody watching has never experienced that, would really encourage you. It's not about the specific amount of money. If you've never been paid apart from your paycheck, you need to start something so that, within a month, somebody sends you $40 or something. It just feels really good. So I think the empowerment is important. I think a lot of people do this for a different creative process, or like I do one thing for my job, but then there's something else I do that I'm excited about.
So interesting, Mark. Fish tanks, personalized Valentine's gifts. I think the interesting thing there is we see a couple of different ideas that have really worked and really meet that definition of a side hustle, that legitimately earning some money. But I think those, as novel as they are, it's important to realize they don't all have to be tech startups. That's one thing. But I think actually the bigger idea is, particularly because we're talking about not quitting your day job, is that what's inside of doing a side hustle is potentially some sense of confidence, being self-empowered, self-directed, and particularly for those that have only ever worked for somebody else, maybe they get a little whiff of this idea of working for themselves and that they can actually do it. It's not some mysterious, complex thing. No, they have that capability, and that might lead to just a sense of well-being or maybe more things. But isn't it interesting, Mark, where we're approaching side hustles not from a get-rich-fast scheme, but actually maybe this is just a source of confidence building for our listeners and our members. Maybe it's just an experiment that could bring them more than just money.
Look, I think you're right to use the word experiment. I think that's what Chris's invitation here really is. The closest, I think, individual that we've studied on the show before that somewhat encourages this level of experimentation is maybe Gary Vee, because he was encouraging those who come up to him, they're saying, I'm not happy in my job, I want to go and do something else. He encourages them to do it in their free time.
Yes, yes.
And I suppose that's the closest that we've probably got here. And
I've got one other. Do you remember Design Your Life?
Oh, yes.
I want to say it was Bill Evans from Stanford? The two guys from Stanford who applied design thinking to your life. And their whole thing is, don't spend a life living someone else's expectations. If you have the desire to live a life that's a bit different, they deeply encourage experimentation. I always remember the fact that I found myself studying psychology at college, but I had never met a psychologist. Like, I had no idea what I was studying for. Like, I had not experimented at all. Maybe if I'd experimented, I may have actually lasted longer than 7 weeks. But the point here is, like, you can do experiments with interviews. You could work on your weekends. You could volunteer. You can do a side hustle. Do you remember that book, Design Your Life?
Yeah, that's right. Bill Burnett and Dave Evans.
Oh, I got the surnames wrapped around the wrong way.
Yeah, very good though.
Yeah, that's a great book. Great book. So that's where that theme of experimentation is. And so fish bowls, personalized gifting. I mean, it can be anything and everything. But isn't it interesting what Chris talked about is the sense of empowerment that despite earning six figures, this lady chose not to do it as a full-time thing.
I think that story is one of those inspirational tidbits that we occasionally run into on the show, which is an idea that doesn't necessarily leave you. You know, we might all be thinking, hey, I've got this great idea, or, oh, I really want to be, in my case, a celebrant. So I'm going to officiate my friend's wedding later this year. And in doing so, obviously, I've got to become officiated here in Australia. And that very nicely will become a bit of a side hustle if I wanted to. And the important thing that obviously Chris is pointing out in that previous clip is that it's up to the individual to choose what percentage of your time, your effort, your prioritization this becomes. And for me, that's incredibly empowering as well as reassuring, because I know, hey, I don't necessarily need to step away from the security of getting superannuation or a pension. I don't need to step away from the continual all year long salary that perhaps if I make Love Hearts is only going to be periodic and come seasonally, for example. So you don't need to worry about the bigger questions of actually running a fully fledged business with overheads and so on. And I like this idea of you're kind of flirting with the idea of setting up your own business, you're experimenting, and I think you probably find that you get inspired once you start seeing a little bit of progress. And what I mean by that is not necessarily progress of money hitting your account. Chris is right. Even if you got $40 from somebody once a month, that's amazing, and that's a reiteration of the work that you're putting into it. But also, I think his invitation to us is just to go out and give it a go, because you might find that you get inspired and you want to go out and work even harder on it. Don't you think, Mike?
I do. And I got some great news, Mark. I'm just going to share my screen here because I think we got so excited about this book. You can actually go to apolloskills.com and you can do the course on this very book for free. And it's got all sorts of cool goodies in it. I think most importantly, you get an audio summary, PDF summary. There's a quiz, homework activity. And like Mark does, you can submit your homework activity and get instant feedback on applying this book, Side Hustle, to your life. So get stuck in there, go to apolloskills.com. You can get this free course, and that's available to all of our listeners, viewers, and members. I mean, we're just adding Mark, this is value add. This is like the ultimate side hustle where you can do a course on the book, Side Hustle.
Yeah, and I really do, from a personal perspective, invite our listeners and viewers to go and give that a go, because it really is an extra step when you can get a little bit of validation or guidance once you've understood the subject matter, you've reflected on it, maybe you've done the assessment, and then you're seeking the feedback. Getting that little bit of guidance, I think, takes the output that you get from a book like this up another level. So I really do encourage all of our listeners and members to go and give that a go on apolloskills.com.
Yeah, because you can literally, in the homework activity, apply the concepts of the book to your idea, write up your homework activity, think it through, submit it, and you get that instant feedback. So if you just need that extra nudge, head over to apolloskills.com. Now, a big part, Mark, of we studied the Lean Startup. We've studied a lot. We did that big product series with Marty Kagan, and testing of ideas and validating ideas is essential. And the reason being is whether you have a startup idea or a side hustle idea, it remains the same. You must constantly get feedback and test the idea, because so many failed products stem from lack of testing, lack of validation. Really, a lot of products in the world are looking for a problem to solve. And actually, what really should happen is You should see the problem, then you build the solution. But a lot of people are out there saying, hey, I got this thing, what can it fix? And that's the wrong way to go about it. If you can go out there with a clear problem in the world and you actually address it, if you can test that fit, you'll be off to the races. And Mark, I think we've got some thinking on that.
You're totally right, Mike. Let's hear again from Chris this time, reiterating this key element and takeaway that we keep on running into on the Moonshot Show, which is this idea of testing your side hustle and also idea validation.
A lot of the episodes that I feature on the show and some of the stories in the book, there's no way to like validate the idea before you do it. Basically, there's a woman, Jen Glantz from New Jersey, who was asked to be a bridesmaid by two of her friends on the same day, and one of her other friends said, "Wow, you're almost like a professional bridesmaid." And so then she's like, huh. And she wrote a Craigslist ad that same day and put it up. It's, I'm a professional bridesmaid if you want to hire me. And it kind of went viral. The next day she had 200 inquiries from people who wanted to hire her and from women who wanted to do that as a career, basically. So she actually decided to like, let me see how far I can take this, right? And so she actually created this little business around it.
No way.
Bridesmaid for hire, made $200,000 in year one.
No
$200,000.
Come on.
So how do you validate that idea before you do it? You don't validate, you just do it. You just see what happens.
You put it out and you say Craigslist, hey.
Exactly.
You've never done it before. Wow, that's crazy.
You know?
Was she doing she make the most of the money from herself actually showing up at the weddings, or was it from teaching the other bridesmaids how to do it?
Good question. I think her main service was actually not the showing up or the teaching other people. It was, I don't know, it was kind of like virtual concierge. It was like, let me do some of that bridesmaid stuff, but from a distance. She does actually wedding planning, basically. Yeah. But it sounds better to be like bridesmaid for hire, you know. But essentially was.
She was coordinating all the friends and doing all the planning for them.
Yeah,
wow.
Exactly.
So she didn't actually have to show up still.
No, you had to pay more if you wanted that, right?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So she didn't have to deal with all the drama.
Of course, yeah. Well, I think that was part of the service she was offering. Like, if you want me to deal with some dramatic situation, I can do that because that has value to people.
I wonder if she showed up to any of these weddings and was actually like holding like the flowers for the person.
I know.
That's hilarious. But Mark, isn't it cool that what we're seeing is so many wildly different ideas that get inspiration just from experiences that you like, enjoy, and that bring you a little bit of sunshine in your life? But I think importantly, what she did in terms of the professional bridesmaid is she made the jump and put the ad on Craigslist. And I think that's the key moment. If you really want to test your idea, post something, put it on some sort of ad directory or classifieds website, you got to get yourself out there. I think the biggest problem, Mark, is I think a lot of us freeze at this moment. So if we were going to give some rapid fire advice to getting yourself out there, people who are like on the Craigslist posting and they're like, should I, shouldn't I? What advice do you have for them to like press the button?
Like we've found on the show before, you know, Julia Cameron, for example, just because other people have done something that you've maybe thought of before doesn't mean that you can't do it or you shouldn't do it, because it'll be the first time that you're doing it. So I think my advice, Mike, would initially be don't put aside fear. Put aside fear and don't put yourself off. Because in my experience, when you've got that little voice in the back of your head, you know, Goggins would always say, you know, write down the voice in your head so that you can objectively look at what it is saying, so that you can notice how it's always negative. At least that's how I've remembered it. And when you're looking at pressing go on a Gumtree ad or whatever it is, that voice will probably say, but what if people don't like me? What if it doesn't work? What if there's a cost associated? What if this? What if that? That voice is just trying to tell you not to do something because it's afraid of change.
Yes.
Ignore those questions, right, Mike? Just go out and give it a go. Have a little bit of confidence.
Also, like, what's the worst that could happen?
What's the worst? You know, maybe you'll get a couple of responses that might be negative. Okay, well, fine. That doesn't matter.
Right.
Who cares?
Yeah.
You know, we've on the Moonshot Show probably received a couple of negative things over the years. Obviously, most of the time it's very, very positive.
Well,
that didn't stop us.
But Mark, like, sometimes we've had feedback, not enough clips.
Yeah.
Other times, too many clips.
Too many.
Well, what do
Exactly.
you do?
That's a very good point. You're always going to have individuals out there that are going to question what it is that you're doing, you're saying, you're selling. And I think if there's anything that's to be taken away from Chris's show today, it really is just go out and give it a go. Learn from that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people want to learn more about Chris Guillebeau and all of his books and all our fantastic Moonshots archive, is there a destination that we've put ourselves out there on that you might be able to get all those goodies and more?
Look, there is a destination online on the internet that is, some would say, space age. It is full of innovative content, transcriptions, reading lists, as well as a lot of advice that we've uncovered along the way through all the superstars of Moonshots show. And you never guess what that website is, listeners. It is www.moonshots.io. Pop along. You can find transcriptions and links to all 273 episodes of the Moonshots show. And if you want to become a member and get the trumpet salute, you can also sign up via our homepage.
So much there. We certainly didn't give up on the publishing. 7 years of publishing the show.
Wow.
It's so great to share these books, these superstars, their habits with our listeners, viewers, and members. And Mark, boy, did Chris Guillebeau, did he dig up some Moonshots wisdom to dish out for us as the last episode of the last clip of the show?
Yeah, I don't want to set this one up too much because I think it's worth reflecting on afterwards. So let's hear from Chris one more time. We've heard about side hustles. We've heard some great case studies on how people are bringing them to life and have been very, very successful at it. So let's hear one final piece of advice from Chris, which is helping us all to stay flexible through this potentially uncomfortable process.
What would you say as a word of advice or some tips for people who started off where maybe they've got a side hustle, maybe they've gone all in and to start their own business, and they feel like they're really struggling. They feel like they're all alone because it seems like everybody on Instagram eats the perfect avocado on toast and has the perfect product launch. And they feel like a bit of a loser and they feel a little bit lonely. What would you want to tell them?
We've all been there. It's not just a matter of like we have been there and then we moved out of it. We have probably been there and then we had some degree of success in the perfect avocado toast, but then like all of a sudden our next photo no one liked, and so it's kind of like this is the cycle of life. And so if you just kind of remain there, then you're not going to be able to know the Southern California beach or whatever the equivalent, like to mix all our metaphors together. So I'm actually I don't necessarily always tell people like just keep going because sometimes I think the best advice is to redirect and try something different.
Sure.
But I think you shouldn't give up on your dream. You know, you shouldn't give up on that ideal. And even if you have to change your strategy.
So that's interesting, Mark, like not giving up. I mean, we could attribute that to probably a quarter of the shows we've done that's been the central theme. However, the nuance here is that you might pivot a lot while you're being resilient, while you've got some good Angela Duckworth grit, you may be pivoting like all crazy to find product market fit, right?
Yeah, you're right. Look, Chris calls out the fact that sometimes you've got to know when to quit, and that's okay. You can say no. It's a skill in itself. But what he was also calling out, as you just said, is that flexibility, which I think is so important, Mike. Knowing that maybe the idea that you've got in your head, it might be a wonderful idea in your mind, but when you put it out there, you test, you get feedback, maybe it requires a little bit of work, or maybe it's a completely different idea. The important thing is getting your foot out the door, giving that a go, is what Chris is inviting us to do here. Don't be afraid of the failure because we've probably all been there. And probably some of us are still going through it, and that's okay too.
Yes.
Go out, find the thing that you're comfortable with through the discomfort, that is, and not give up on the dream of having something that you're really, really passionate about.
Yeah, and look, the thing here is we kind of start to see like a set of thinking that specifically is very Moonshots, but applied to the side hustle world. You can easily see it being applied to a project to a startup, to a whole business, to a product. I think there's a really important thing here is that we've got this new avenue that's all available to us personally. I think that's particularly powerful about his work and what he's done in this. And Mike, what a perfect follow-up to The Art of Nonconformity, right?
Look, I love The Art of Nonconformity. It felt very in line with the lessons that we've learned from somebody like Ryan Holiday, getting uncomfortable, using fear as your guide through the process. What a great sandwich this is within the trilogy, because now we know, okay, well, if you can channel that nonconformity spirit,
yes,
and you believe in yourself, you can then go out and maybe believe in a bit of a side hustle business that you've been thinking of. But Mike, that dinner is not yet done, because we have that third book in the trilogy coming up in the next show, which is the $100 Startup. So there really is a full process, I think, of Chris Guillebeau's books, inviting us to go out and have a crack.
And the curious thing here, not written in that order, which is interesting. They actually started with $100 Startup, which is crazy. Now, back to your food metaphor. From the sandwich of today, Mark, we had 4-layered sandwich, 4 clips. Which one is your homework assignment?
Look, I love the idea of staying flexible. That's always one of the most important things that I think I've learned along the show. Be flexible, be agile, have a growth mindset. But actually, I liked the setup clip. I liked our first one from Chris today. I enjoyed this breakdown and this invitation to find a little bit of maybe flexibility in your life, but also a little bit of a creative expression. What about you, Mike? Of all the tasty sides that we've had today from Chris?
The testing and the resilience are big Moonshots themes. But actually, if I look at the first 2 clips right now, both are quite new. It's not just about the money, it's the confidence that comes, as well as having that second income. So I'll take both. I'm going to double dip today.
You know what? That's okay, because we're double dipping with Chris Guillebeau.
There we go.
We're triple dipping. So you can have as many as you want.
There we go. Well, Mark, thank you to you. Thanks for pulling together all of these clips here for show 273. And thank you to you, our listeners, our members, our viewers, here for the study of Side Hustle by Chris Guillebeau. And boy, we had 4 ideas. The first 2 big, really new, groundbreaking ideas for the show was that having a side hustle is really about having a little bit of an insurance policy, having that second income stream. And it's not only about that money. It also comes with a big dose of confidence and fulfillment, and that'll set you off in the world. And then we take on some great Moonshots principles, test your idea, validate your idea. And when you go in the ups and the downs, it's a continuous cycle that requires that keyword, resilience. Now, if you practice these 4 ideas, you'll have way more than a side hustle, way more than a second income. You'll be on the way to being the best version of yourself. And that is what we are all about enabling here on the Moonshots Podcast. That's a wrap.